So delegation it is, and thank you everybody for joining and listening in. Delegation is the term that we use in Agile Lean Leadership to talk about deliveries from one team and circle to another, and we want to give you a little introduction to that. This is part of the Agile Lean Leadership Practitioner course that we are developing currently. We'll start up just looking at the drawing we normally use to talk about these things about Agile Lean Leadership. We have the generalized teams, we call them circles. We have the value stream starting with the customers at the left, peripheral teams on the periphery of the organization serving the customers directly in contact. And then presumably we need to have some teams in the center that don't have real life external customers, but their customers are the internal teams serving the real customers. And we can also extend it to sort of link in our suppliers. And that's the value stream as a lot of people will recognize it from traditional lean. And we try to make these teams the best possible way so that they serve the customers optimally the way we understand it today. And as we've talked about, each circle have a manifest that declares who are we, what are we doing, what's the purpose of us being here, and how can you get in contact with us, and how will you contact us if you want our services. So that's all very straightforward in many ways. Above these primary circles, as we call them, in the value chain, they are also referred to as being on level 1, and level 2 above them are where the product owners and the scrum masters meet to prioritize the strategic resolution, the operational resolution, and sometimes you also need team members to meet for a tactical resolution. If across the teams there are certain dependencies like access to test equipment or anything like that, then there may be a need for team members to do tactical resolution. So that's sort of the very standard and fairly simple way. At the bottom we have this funny orange looking thing that we call a circle, although it doesn't look like a circle, but that's equivalent to what Spotify has called a guild. So that's typically a collection of people with similar skills that work across the value chain on certain skills, which could be test or design or marketing or any other skill that you would want to create like a community and a working environment for. That's a secondary circle, comprised of people who have their home in the primary circle. Now, that's just to remember, this is the background we talk about, and delegation is not vanilla Scrum. The vanilla Scrum idea is to collect all skills in the team. And that's of course fine for project teams and small organizations. In large organizations, we typically cannot get everything into one team. The deliveries are larger, they require many skills, complicated skills, research scientists and so on that solve specific problems, and therefore we need to have the multiple teams. And therefore there will be handovers between teams. Now that was not the idea in vanilla Scrum. It was to remove handovers and let everything happen in the team. And that's fine if you can, but very often you can't. So you will need handovers and you will need somebody delivering into your project. So we have this value chain that we saw. Everyone is a customer for somebody, supplier to somebody, like good old Deming said, and there's this pull principle. One circle requests a delivery from another, and in order to do that, there has to be a defined relationship. But there are also some special delegation between primary circles at level 1, level 2 circles, and 7 secondary circles. And delegation is the formal mechanism, and this is the mechanism we're going to talk about today. What can you do in practical terms to achieve this and to avoid as many mistakes as possible? This whole business of handovers is typically something that creates a lot of the disturbances in organizations that people have forgotten, or a ball has been dropped on the floor, and so on. So it's of considerable value to have a good principle for this. So here again we have the backdrop of the drawing, and for example there's a deliverable down here in Circle C. They cannot do that, however, and they need to hand it over to Circle E. They have the competences, and we call that a delegation. At Circle C we still keep a copy, maybe another color if we do paper. If it's an IT system, obviously we maintain the relation like a shortcut, like a desktop shortcut more or less, so that from Circle C we can still see the other one. We can see where it is, and we can follow the status of it. So that's the delegation, and that's the classic delegation. Obviously that could go to our suppliers as well. So this is in the value chain, and maybe it could be here, suppliers, and maybe it also, if the customers have access to putting in their orders this way, this is just an order to the team in the peripheral. But of course the customer retains a copy of his order so that he can follow the progress. The special delegations, for example, Circle B has an opportunity from one of their customers that they don't know how to handle, really, because this was an unusual request, not part of what we really believed those customers would want. So how are we going to handle it? They don't know how to do it. So they escalate it up to the strategic resolution and ask the collection of product owners and say, what is the wisest thing to do here for the sake of the whole company or the whole organization? So they escalate. Escalation is also a delegation. And in the same way, there may be an opportunity or an impediment, a stone on the way here in Circle D, and they say, we don't know how to handle that because that is bigger than us. It involves the whole organization, and they escalate it to the Scrum Masters, who meet regularly and try to resolve those things and agree on it and have sensible cross-team decisions. So the delegation upwards is any time that you have something that is just too big for the single team to handle. And by the same token, you can also have a deliverable in a secondary circle where someone we are agreeing on, let's say we are all trying to evaluate a new test system, all those people who have responsibilities for test are together from all the teams, and they're trying to come up with the best recommendation, and there's some work that needs to be done, and they have decided that it could be done by a person in Circle E. So that particular piece of work, that deliverable, is then delegated to Circle E. And that's also a delegation mechanism. So it's the same fundamental mechanism we use in the value stream and for those sort of cross-cutting concerns that might be. A proposal for how to handle this. This is like you could call it a workflow or a timeline of what happens here. So the delegator, the guy who wants to delegate something to the other side, to the delegatee, so he starts to delegate something. He delivers it to them and has a request for a delivery deadline. There's a response from the other side, either a confirmation or a rejection. And then maybe we need to have some common refinement because it's not clear what he really means, the delegator. The delegatee may not understand, there may be details. So there's a common refinement of this item. What do you really need? What is the acceptance criteria? And so on. Once that is in place, and they're happy with it on the delegatee side, they will change the status to ready. Okay, now it can be worked on. And that whenever there's a state change on the delegatee side, that becomes an event on the delegator side. And so they are being told, either if you do it manually, by an email or some other piece of information, shout across the hallway or whatever the mechanism is, and they update their display. All right, now we know that they have put it into ready. And when they've then planned it, that means they've either put it in a sprint if they do Scrum, or they put it on a Kanban board if they just do continuous flow. So now it's actually put in the production line. All right, we update the display on the other side, and now it's in progress. Someone is actually working on it, and all right, let's update on the other side. And if any unexpected hiccups happens, then it's the delegatee's responsibility to let the delegator know. Oh, we have this issue now. We need to talk about this. How can we circumvent it? Can we choose an alternative solution, or can we do this or that? Just like you would have in a normal team, but here it's just cross-team. And then they collaborate until the best solution found, or they may have to escalate. So if they can't agree on it and say, we don't know what to do here because this is going to cost money, then they may have to escalate it up for someone to take a company-wide decision. If the delegator needs to verify before we can declare done, then on the delegatee side, they will change the status to ready for test. Whenever they've done everything they should, we just need the final verification. And then he tests and verifies. If not okay, you have to collaborate until you found the solution, or again escalate if you end up in disagreement. And then, when it's done on the delegatee side, of course it's done on the delegator side. If people agree on this, it's not that hard to handle. It's fairly straightforward. In fact, of course, we're trying to achieve between teams the same kind of collaboration as we normally would have between individuals inside teams. This is what General Stanley McChrystal called team of teams. So we're trying to get the same mechanisms to work. Obviously not exactly the same, but as close as we can get. Good enough for government work. Now, how to maintain that transparency? In IT systems like our Agemba, there is a link whenever you do this, and you can see it, and it will of course automatically update on the delegator side. It's a publish subscribe mechanism, and you can see it how there's an epic in Circle A that's been delegated to Circle B, and this is one of the cards we show from the screen, and there's these icons that illustrate here where the cursor is now, illustrates it delegated to or delegated from. Of course, if you have IT systems, that's the right way to do it. And by the way, it's one of the main arguments that we push for our Agemba solution, is that it's really rather hard to do it manually if you are typically, as teams are, not co-located. Then, but of course it can be done manually. Down below there's like shown, okay, so what are we going to do? We just use paper and pen and post-its, and when we delegate, here's an item, a deliverable, a product backlog item to the left, and we now delegate it, and on the delegator side we mark it that it is delegated to a certain circle, and on the other side of course it's delegated from. We, for example, change the color so that we can tell the difference on the originating side between one that we have to work with and one where we are just waiting for someone else to work. And again, whenever there's a state change like ready, then we should be told by the people we've delegated it to, and we can then update our display. It's not too hard, but of course there is a need for some IT support here. When to delegate and what? As we started by saying, it's not part of vanilla Scrum. So if you can actually squeeze your project into just one team doing it, that's the most effective and efficient way of doing it. So no need to invent delegation if it's not needed. But if a single team cannot fulfill a delivery, then you're sort of between the rock and the hard place. You have to do it. Or maybe we should rather say that it can't fulfill it in an economic way. There are simply some other people that are better at doing this than we are. It may be that there are scales of economy, like at Rikstv in Oslo. What they did was that every team on the periphery dealing with customers could do some marketing, but not all of it, because they couldn't do the heavy lifting, running the big email campaigns or the TV commercials and so on. There were specially skilled people behind the scenes that could do that, and so they delegated that work to them. Or maybe it could take too long, or require too many diverse skills that we don't have, and of course we could end up having teams become too big and therefore efficient for that reason. And of course this is a compromise. There is no such thing as a free lunch here. It's a compromise. When do you want to use it? And you have to be very diligent about it. So in order for this to work, you have to have your structure of teams very clear. In other settings, we've argued for the case that each team should have its manifesto that declares to everybody else who are we, what are we doing here. We design the teams so that it will handle the bulk of the deliveries to real customers, what we mostly do. High internal coherence, low external coupling between the teams. And if there are exceptions, then we try to handle it just on a team-to-team basis. But if we can't do it, then we have to escalate. If we have reoccurring exceptions, this seems to happen more frequent now, then maybe we should go back and revisit our team structure. Maybe it's not ideal any longer. Team structure should not be seen as a static thing, because of course the world changes. So if we now have in a team a grand delivery, a big delivery of many different things and their mixed complexity, then it's sort of obvious, following the complexity thinking from Kenevin, that to the right of the drawing up there in the corner, the obvious are fairly easy to delegate, because they are, yes, obvious. Any half-wit should be able to deliver that, really, so it's obvious. The complicated might be candidates if they can be specified, and because the definition of complicated is knowledge is there, but it's a little harder to get at. Maybe we could delegate some complex, but they're not really good candidates for this, because we don't know yet precisely. So complex items should really not be delegated. This is exactly why we have a small team, because it's very good for solving complex, because there's this high bandwidth of interaction between people with different ideas and different points of view. Whenever you have a big job that you cannot handle in your team, always look for the obvious to delegate. It's the same thing with outsourcing. If you really want to outsource the development to India, you have to do it with the obvious things. It's very hard to do with the complex things, because it's very hard to reach common understanding. That's exactly what complexity is about. How hard is it to reach common understanding? So this gives you sort of an idea of where to use it. A few other things to remember here. We promote the idea of using delegation instead of borrowing resources from other people. Because if you start borrowing resources, that's what people do all the time. Every training course, more or less, people tell me, oh yeah, but we don't really have stable teams because this guy also has to work over there and he has to do that, but it ruins the team aspect. So it ends up multiplexing single people, and that destroys their concentration and their flow. So if you can, it's much better to use the delegation. You have to have clear operating agreements, delivery conditions documented, because this is something you need to do, be able to do, without having huge discussions every single time. What to expect? How does the delegatee actually prioritize? The delegator needs to know. Remember to talk about delivery time and make that very specific. Don't ever just assume. If an item that you delegate is not obvious, then the delegator needs to participate in refinement, because there's a good chance that they didn't understand it just from the written words on the delegatee side. So you need to talk and reach common understanding. The same if it's really the case that you need to verify before it can be done, then you have to include that in the formal process. Agree on response time and lead time. We delegate deliverables, not tasks. These are not tasks, because then we end up thinking of people like resources instead of teams that can supply us a deliverable. We still need to let the delegatee circle operate like a team. And they do their own tactical planning. It's not tasks that are pushed on them. It's also possible that you could delegate pure values. Typically level 2 circles might have an idea of achieving a certain value, and they can then delegate to a primary circle and say, could you please investigate that, or do something, or come up with a recommendation. Whenever you receive a delegation from someone, it ends up in your inbox. Any backlog has some sort of an inbox or new area, or whatever you might call it, and then the delegatee circle can place it where it makes sense for them. They have to get it into their structure. And you have to remember that the delegated items should be small, sprint by sprint, if the delegator uses Scrum. You can't keep track of 100 of them. It has to be a relatively, it can't be a dominant figure of what you're doing. It should still be the minority of your jobs that you delegate. Otherwise, it's not really Scrum anymore. You end up being just a planner of suppliers. And that's maybe necessary, but then it's just not Scrum anymore. The delegatee typically ends up working in what we call the scaled down fashion. And that is, there's input from many sources, and he has to balance that. It's like a small company with many small customers, and it has to balance how they serve these customers. It's a separate discussion, a separate problem, but there it is. And there's some advanced things here. You should always keep an eye on the delegatee. The Scrum Master on the delegator side should stay in close contact. Go and visit them, participate in daily scrums and so on, especially when you start working this way, simply to keep track of any informal things that are not immediately visible. When you delegate from level 2 circles, that's also an advanced thing, but same mechanisms apply. Escalation, we talked about that, and again, it is the same mechanism really. And you also can delegate to and from secondary circle. It may be a primary circle needs something from a secondary one, like oh, we need a design of a new logo for this website, this new graphic profile we have, and we delegate it to the graphic arts designer situated in from a secondary circle where they meet all the graphic arts designers, and then we delegate that way. And sometimes it's the other way around, that there is a piece of work in the secondary circle, but one of the members take it back to his primary circle, and that's also delegation. So the same mechanism can be used for this. Very often people end up discussing internal accounting. Most of that discussion is typically a waste, but nevertheless. So how do circles pay for services from other circles? The general idea is that you count cost. It's only the peripheral circles that have real profit. How do you then evaluate whether center circles are performing or not performing? Well, relative performance, improvement, velocity, lead time, that sort of thing is okay. Not individual performance, of course, but team performance. It's fair enough that people want to have a handle on how it works. I mean, can we improve, and so on. Some people have attempted to come up with very, very complicated schemes for putting price on items, and for now I would just issue a warning not to go there unless you desperately need to. Everything I've seen has had damaging side effects, so don't go there unless there's some CFO who twists your arm and forces you to do it. And that was really it. The main part of it is about trying to come up with some fairly simple solutions to the bulk of the work, and it's open for questions now, and also, of course, other comments if you have them.